Hello, everybody. The very friendly, competent, intelligent looking face in front of you is Helen Stagg. Helen is Executive Director of Change Happens, which is an organization right here in Houston, right in a community that I used to live in and where University of Houston is set up. It's a nonprofit that serves the community, and I'm going to let her tell you how. As a field instructor at the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work, we had students placed there. And I first time I went, it just sprang up, came out of nowhere. The first time I went, I was shocked at what they were doing. That was decades ago. And since that time, Helen Stagg has assumed the helm. And everywhere I go, I hear her name. Something happens. Somebody says, "Oh, see what change happenings happens is doing." One of my relatives fell into hard times, and someone said, "Oh, you need to contact Change Happens." So I'm hearing about Change Happens, and I wanted her here so we could get her story and understand how it is that she's able to lead her organization, their organization, I know she'll be more modest than that, their organization into the huge success that it has become and provide such tremendous services to the third ward community and beyond. So, welcome, Helen.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jean, for inviting me. I really am thrilled and honored to be able to share my story and to be even invited to share it. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Okay, so let's just begin with you. This, as you probably know, Leading Consciously is about leadership for racial and social justice. And that's exactly what Change Happens does in a nonprofit setting. So I want to know first about you and how you grew up. What was your earliest leadership activity?
Okay. Well, I grew up in East Texas in a town called Nacogdoches, which I still consider to be my home. I'm a child of the 60s, and so I grew up during the time of the civil rights struggle. I attended a segregated school all through up until high school and graduated from that school and then went on to college to an integrated setting. So that was my first instance with in a school with other cultures and people.
Okay, I
Uh,
want to ask you because I went through that very same transition and in high school. Okay, from segregation to integration. And
right.
I was fortunate. I went to a very well integrated Quaker school where I didn't, they were, prejudice was not even in the equation. When you went from segregation to integration, when you accepted, how did it feel?
One thing about I went to Texas A&M, but at that time it was East Texas State University in Commerce, Texas. And there was a high concentration of African Americans there. So that was one thing. But also, when I first I did a visit during the summer, and the sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha had just became a chapter on that campus. And somehow, in my process of learning about the campus and everything, I met some of the sorors there. And they kind of took me in, which gave a whole different kind of relationship to the school and the community and the support system. And we had our own dormitory on campus. I moved from the dormitory I was in into the sorority dormitory, and so it was that sisterhood. So it was much like what I experienced growing up at home in Nacogdoches in terms of this village kind of arrangement where everybody, church, family, I never knew that anything was missing out of my life because of the people that surrounded me, always made me value who I was and what I could do and support it. And I felt that same way going off to college.
Okay, so you didn't go through the shock I went through then, it sounds like. Okay, so you're in college. What was one of your earliest leadership activities?
I think probably with the sorority, I any task or any group that I'm involved in, I take on these responsibilities and commitments. And, I went in as a pledge as the vice president of the pledge group. And so that was probably my first leadership role at the school.
Okay, so when you say you take on any place you go, you take on responsibilities. This is what I've sensed about you. So what happened that you're willing to do that? Because you know a lot of people hang back and they're afraid to take on responsibilities. What's in your mindset that you just do that?
I think probably it was how I was raised. My grandmothers, both my grandmothers, my mother. I had a great aunt that was like a grandmother. They were really strong. I think Renaissance women for me growing up, they believed in ownership of businesses, hairstylists, rental property. They worked hard, they saved money, they brought property. So there was nothing that seemed to stop them, even though they were growing. My mother was born in 1924, and my grandmother's in the late 1800s. So they didn't let racial injustice or the fact that they didn't have access to education stop them. So that's what I grew up around. And they also believed in working hard and being filled with integrity and respect for people, and that you could accomplish all things, and they lived that out. So that is what it came from.
Whoa, what a foundation
Mm,
to have multiple strong women in your life doing things, owning things, running things.
yes,
Okay, so it was natural then for you. You just stepped right, you just stumped it up and stepped right into it.
I did. And it was not one of those processes where you were forced to or told to or none of that. It just happened. It was all so much filled with love. You just felt like that was what you had to do. It was not anything you ever thought about or questioned. It was just as it is.
Filled with love. Say more about that.
And that's what I saw that I was surrounded with. It was an idyllic kind of childhood. I mean, you could take a page out of Huckleberry Finn kind of and apply it to what my life was like and with my brothers, and just being free and liberated to go into the woods and do things there and to fish and to build clubhouses and all sorts of freedom, uh, that we were allowed to feel these kinds of activities and do things. And then we always knew that no matter what, we were okay, we were loved. And it was this kind of unconditional feeling that was generated by all of them to all of my siblings and myself.
That is just flat storybook. And I know where you sit now, you know that so many kids don't have that benefit. So you see that contrast.
I do, very much so.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna get there. I'm literally listening to you. I'm literally thrilled. My husband grew up in a small town in North Carolina,
Mhm.
and he roamed the woods. He and his buddies and built ponds and chased squirrels and all. And so he has a independence, and he also grew up with unconditional love, and he has an
Mhm.
independence, a can-do spirit that I
Right.
don't see in that many people. And I'm seeing it right now in you, and it makes that much more sense. I think when I was hearing about change happens in the community, I go somebody place and people mention it, it was that can do spirit that that I gravitated toward and that led me to want to invite you here. Okay. So we're in the woods, we're filled with love, we're building tree houses. Then we go off to college, we go to A&M, we're still in a protected environment, we're still in a loving environment, we're in a sisterhood environment.
Mhm.
We get out, and then what?
We get out, and I had a choice. I could go ahead and work on my master's degree at that time, or I could take a job. I I wanted to finish college really quickly because I didn't want to be a burden to my family in terms of having to pay tuition and all of those costs. So when I went to college, I was 17. When I finished, I was 20. I was at 3 years later. And I decided that I would get a job before went to work on a master's degree. And that's then I returned back home to Nacogdoches, my hometown, to figure out where I was going to go, where I was going to apply. At that time, there was a state agency, the Department of Human Services, which has all of the entitlement programs like food stamps and TANF and all of those programs under it. And I applied for a job there because I had majored in sociology and wanted to go into social work as well. And I applied there. And that was one of the times where I was faced with this kind of actuality about racism and all of that. Um, Most other people would have applied for the job, went through the interview process, and they either got it or not. I applied for the job. It was in the it was in 1970. Uh, but state agencies, particularly in small towns, were not. You didn't see Black people in those working in those agencies. So before I could be hired, of course, there were the external threats to the state agencies to hire more people of color. So they were faced with that, even if they didn't want to. But they had some kind of quota they needed to fill. But before I could be offered the job, I had to go through the interview, not just with the supervisor level. I had to go through a series of interviews that gradually went up the hierarchy. Not only that, I had to go through an interview with the county judge in the place where I was going to work because the county judge, as they probably do still, hold a lot of power and influence in small communities. So it was that process. And once I was deemed acceptable, uh, then I got the job. And the job was in a place called Coots, Texas. Not sure if you've heard it. It's in Southeast Texas, about 20 miles from Beaumont, but it is a classic story of a railroad track with one side of the town for whites and one side for Black people. And so I was probably the only Black person that had some kind of job in that county outside of custodian or some kind of laboring job. And so that was a total shock to me as well.
Oh my word. So what did that do to you internally? It was a shock, but did it depress you? Did it make you sad? Did it make you committed? Did it make you rebellious, angry?
It did not it did not make me sad. It was a call for me to try and represent who I do, but also what Black people can do. Um, it was this kind of system where the county judge, as I said, his wife was the working alongside me. So it was that kind of nepotism that went on there. So I went to work there. And I was working with the wife of the county judge, and this whole environment appeared to be racist in terms of how they treated people who came through, how they talked to people, the terms that they used. Uh, once interrupted a conversation, uh, not interrupted, but I observed the conversation that the judge's wife and someone else who worked there was having. And they referred to a person as a Negra. So that's the kind of atmosphere that I'm talking about. But I did get angry when I heard that, and I interrupted that. I'm also a person that believes in that when you see something that's not right, that you speak out about it. So even though I was 21 years old and these people were older and they controlled everything there, I spoke out about that
What did you do?
shameful behavior.
What did you say? Do you remember?
I I just said that uh, that I was, concerned about the word that was used, that um, that was not respectful. I explained who I was and what I did, and how using that kind of language was degrading and all of that. And they were kind of taken aback. Nobody said a word. Uh, and after I said what I needed to say, I just walked out. And but I did not. I had to work with the lady that I was working with, and something shifted after that with her. I'm not sure what happened, but there was a shift in there. And so her attitude became to be more, I would say, lighter, enlightening, more respectful, and
Oh,
from there.
I am blown away by this. This is 1970, 1971. You're 21. Someone makes a blatantly racist comment, whether they thought it was or not. In our world, it is. You said something, you explained who you were, you had a conversation telling them. It wasn't you called them names, you just talked about the behavior, how it felt to you and who you were, and then you left.
Yes.
And then you got a response.
Mhm.
I am that is so wonderful. People don't know how to do that in 2022. And you're doing it in 1970. That's marvelous.
Yeah,
And no repercussions. Instead, you gain more respect.
that's right. That's right. Even I worked there for 8 months, and even when it was time for me to leave, I had some uh, misgivings about leaving because I had I and I say this with all humility, not taking any credit for that, but there was a change in how people were treated and looked at, even in terms of the recruitment and bringing in people to work for that state agency. The judge and his wife then invited me to dinner, for instance, which would have been unheard of before. So it changed and it shifted, and I felt that because of my being there, not me, Helen, but as a Black person being there, that it opened it up for other Black people and people of color to be more accepted and what they could do. So I was really grateful for that
You
opportunity.
had ample proof of, so you've heard the phrase, the power of one. You've had ample proof of the power of one person who's determined to be respected and respectful.
I sure had the proof of it. And, I had it long before growing up, everything, but I certainly had it in that particular situation, which was probably one of the most difficult ones that I had been in.
When you went home that night after you had spoken up, did you tremble in your sleep? I mean, how did it?
No, I felt just kind of good. I shared that story with my mother. There was no place there for me to live in Coons, so I had to drive to Beaumont, Texas, which was about 20 miles away to find an apartment. My mother and my grandmothers wanted me, back in the time where you see like the green, the movie, the green, forget the name of it,
Yeah,
but where
the
black people could not travel and get a
it's called
hotel
the green
room,
card.
green card. So my grandmother rented out rooms to particularly like or they stayed at her house. She made it like a boarding house for particularly for pastors who came into town to preach or something. So they wanted me to to live with a older woman there in that city and like rent a room from her. And I didn't want to do that. I was of the 70s at that point, so I wanted to live independently. So I drove back and forth from Beaumont to this little town. But when I got home, I felt good in that I had the opportunity to address it, and it felt rewarding and liberating as well.
Okay. You can probably tell. I'm really sort of blown away. I've never, I've never met someone who at that age did what you did and actually had the conversation. Okay. So we're at the job. So fast forward me to Change Happens. Did you start off working at Change Happens? How did you get to be the director of it?
Well, I had a 22-year career with the state agency that I started off with.
Okay.
Uh, and I got married and I moved to Houston, and that's where I've been here for over 40 years. So I had worked in state agency, and both my daughters, I later got divorced. I had two daughters, and I stayed with the state agency because there are certain things that I believed as a single parent that I needed to do.
Sure.
And one was to provide stability, but also to be able to freely work, be able to work, and I needed to work, but also to be able to spend all of my other available time raising my daughters. And so I stayed with the state agency, although there were many opportunities for other careers. I know they would take me away from them. Uh, and Once they graduated from high school and went off to college, I thought, this is the only job I've had. And after 22 years, I'm going to try something else. And someone approached me about heading up a firm that was coming to Houston to work kind of in the same field, get the office set up and to direct it and all of that. And that's when I left the state agency and went to work for a private firm and worked there for a while. And then I met the founder of Change Happens. It was called Families in the Urban and Social Attack back then, Reverend Leslie Smith.
Sure was, yes.
hmm And I met him doing some work, and uh, he invited me to come to work in the nonprofit organization, and I accepted. And that was in 2000. So I've been at Change Happens for 22 years.
So you rose up to your current position.
I did,
How many
3 years
steps?
ago.
How many
Well,
how many how many promotions did it take you to get where you are now?
it was two, and then offer of the CEO position.
Okay, so let's stop here and let's talk about Change Happens as an organization so people can picture it. Please describe it, what it does. What was it about Change Happens that made you want to work there?
Okay. Change Happens started in 1989, so it's been around about 33 years. Started with one program, substance misuse treatment program. And it's grown from that one program to over 25 today, from 3 employees to almost 80 employees today. Um, it's like Audre Lorde said that it started with that one program, but you don't meet people with a single issue life. So substance misuse is caused by many things or exacerbated by many things, and it could be lack of housing or not having access to health care or insurance and all of that. And that's what we found out as we began to work through that. There were many needs that our communities had, and our response was to try and address those needs. And as you go through, we have programs of after school, programs dealing with youth incarceration, case management for children, mental health counseling, treatment, uh, HIV prevention and outreach and care, um, pulling together neighborhood groups of people to work on issues of affordable housing and economic redevelopment, access to health insurance. We've grown to have services in 59 counties in Texas.
59
Uh,
counties?
mhm.
Okay.
Our health insurance program, we're one of those federal navigator programs, and we're in 59 counties. So we've grown in that way. One of the things that really um, that I wanted to stay was because there was this opportunity to just do things. I never liked to do just one thing. So I had an opportunity to, I remember having a conversation with the CEO at the time once when I first got there, maybe a year. And he said, I want to build a building because we were in a rental property then. And that's all I had to hear. And when he said that, I thought, okay, I'm going to help him build this building. So I went to work on fundraising and meeting people, and I even have sketches of sitting where I just hand drew how that building could look and what the rooms in the building would be. Uh, but it was that freedom that would allow me to expand on all of that. When we moved into that building, we had raised the $2.5 million to build it, pay it off, all of those things. And that those classrooms that I drew before was the how the diagrams were is how the architect took the renderings and brought them into reality. So it's seeing things like that, learning all of these new things. I knew nothing about construction and architect or even land development and all of that, but I had the opportunity to do that. It, also for grant writing, I had not ever really written applications for grants before, but I learned that and developed that skill. And now I teach a grant writing class for social workers at U of H. So it's the opportunity just to continue learning and engaging and putting all of that out and that's what I'm trying to create now there for other people as well.
Okay, so let me finish up my question, then I want to come to what you're saying. So it took you 3 promotions to get there. You were approached to be the CEO or you applied for the job?
No, I didn't really apply for it because I never really wanted to be a CEO. I liked what I was doing. I liked, even though I performed CEO kinds of things and they were behind the scenes kind of stuff, I liked that. And I didn't want to be a CEO. It's like Enron falling. It's like too big to fall or something like that. The unthinkable kind of happened in that the longtime founder and CEO decided to transition out. Uh, that was not anticipated or projected, and it wasn't. It happened really quickly as well. And even before that happened, years before that, there was something intuitively told me that I was going to be put in a place that I had to fill that position. I don't can't explain it.
Yes.
It's just what I knew.
Yes.
And that is what happened. So I was put there in that place at that time, and I was put in as an acting at the time and acted in that capacity for about a year. And then I was offered the position and I accepted it. And even though I didn't want to be CEO at the time, I knew that I was the person that needed to be CEO at the time through this transition.
Okay, so Helen, I, I, I'm going to stumble on this question. I need you to help me. You know something about how life works
Mhm,
and how opportunities happen
mhm,
that a lot of people don't know.
mhm.
You're nodding your head, so I know you know what I'm talking about. And I
Yes,
sensed this about you before I met you, as I heard what was happening with Change Happens. Again, this is why when the opportunity presented to interview through Shara, I took it. What is this thing that you know that a lot of people don't know about opportunities?
there's nothing that I do that's apart from my belief in this universal force of God. And I see that happening in all things, in all creation. I see it. And so I think it's that connection and that belief and that faith in that, uh, and my being a witness to it, not just in my own life, uh, but seeing it, what it can do in the lives of other people. I think it's that simple, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So for those of you who the word God is anathema, substitute your own word, substitute life force, substitute Allah, substitute universe, make your own substitution. But listen to what she's saying. So say it again and just, we know you mean God, but just use another word just so that it can be after the cross. You have sensed it, you would have a profound and simple belief in what?
And a universal love and connection that surrounds me, that provides me with the support, the opportunities, the no matter whatness, that everything will be all right.
Only to leader. Okay, now through change happens. You meet a multitude of people who think they have that, but they wonder why the universe is not helping them, right?
Yes.
What's the difference?
I think one of the biggest differences might be that the value of the value of self and knowing their own worthiness. I think that people may see themselves as not being worthy of certain things, and it can't happen to me because I don't have this or that, or I'm flawed with these many different things. So I believe that that plays a big role in self acceptance and self love, and knowing that you're worthy of all things.
Okay, so I'm just so delighted because so many people need to hear this, and you're a living example of it. So it's not just, oh, I wish, I wish, I wish, and something external is supposed to help me and it's not here. It's a belief in myself, what you call, and I love this phrase, the no matter whatness. You have a no matter whatness, so that it's this doesn't work out or that doesn't work out. Finish the sentence.
Everything's going to be all right. And it's also knowing that you're going to work for that. you're working, I always strive to work in excellence, not just to get by or not just to say that I've done it. Everything that I try to do, no matter uh, if I were digging a ditch or whatever I was doing, it's going to be to try and do it to the best way that I can do it, and bringing and learning and bringing all of that to whatever it is that I'm doing. It's from the smallest, because there really are no small things. Everything has an impact and an effect on something else.
So what do you say to the people who say, if they won't pay me what I'm worth, I'm going to give them only what they pay me. I'm not going to put myself out because if they too cheap to pay me, why should I put myself out for them?
Well, I do a lot of talking to the people who work at Change Happens, and one of the things that I say to them is that opportunities present themselves as you show up and you present who you are, which means that, if you are giving and striving to do the best job, uh, you're not hurting the organization. If you may be hurting it in some ways, but the person that is being most affected is going to be you. So as you uh, try to do the best that you can do and strive for excellence, opportunities then come and present themselves. And that's basically what I would say. And that's what I've seen happen as well.
If you put yourself out, regardless, opportunities will come to you.
Mhm.
And they may not come in the form you want,
Right.
but it's still an opportunity.
That's right.
I'm struck that you say that you did not want to be CEO. I'm struck by two things, actually. The
Mhm.
first is you said you had an intuitive hit years before that I might one day be asked to serve as CEO. That's number one.
Mhm.
A lot of people getting that hit would dismiss it and say, "Oh no, that could never happen to me." You didn't dismiss it. You just noticed it and kept pushing, right? Kept doing what you were doing. Then the second piece was when the opportunity presented itself, you looked around and you said, "I'm best suited." And you did that with all humility, as I'm hearing it, and all awareness of your self worth and what you were contributing.
Yes. I looked around. I was a senior director. I was over everything in the organization. So, and I knew we had a group of talented, committed people, but the leadership role uh, was lacking in terms of some things. So I knew that I was the best suited.
Say more about the leadership role that was lacking. And I know, Helen, I'm asking you to be very immodest, but you also have the capacity to assess. I can see that you can be sit back and assess people and the situation. What was the leadership role that you knew you could bring to the table that wasn't otherwise there?
One of the things that I knew when I decided to accept the acting position, and I spoke to the group of people, our staff there, and I said to them, this is what my consideration is, that I'm not going to be the leader that the society tells us we need to be. Society would tell us we need to be competitive, but I want to be a collaborator and collaborate with others. It would tell us that we need to be aggressive and go after things, and but I wanted to be bold and accountable. It would tell us that we didn't need to leave in love, but I am a leader in love, and you can be hold people accountable. You can work in excellence, and you can do all that in love. So I laid out before I even started who I was about, and I thought about that I thought, can I, before I accepted, I thought, can I bring that and still succeed in this position? Uh, is Are they ready for that? And I came to the conclusion that I could serve, maybe make a difference in some way and provide some testimony to somebody that you can lead with those values and still be successful. And that's what changed my mind about accepting the role and the responsibilities because it is an all consuming proposition.
Nonprofit leaders don't last.
Mhm, mhm.
They don't last. They have the board telling them what to do, each individual board member thinking they're their own fiefdom to tell them what to do. They have the community saying, "You're not giving us enough." They have the staff saying, "You're not paying us enough." You have a hard job.
Yeah,
In the context of all of that, you decided to lead with love.
yes.
Can you make that really concrete for somebody who is wondering what the hell is she talking about? Can you think of any example where you asked, held someone accountable, or you responded to someone who was getting up, about to get on your last nerve or whatever, and how you chose love instead to lead with love instead?
Well, in a couple of examples, I was having a conversation with a program coordinator, for instance, about areas that needed improvement and things that they could do, the support and the coaching. So, was going through that. You could go through that kind of exercise, really aggressive and really dogmatic, and you need to do this and that, or you can talk about ways that you can give the data and the facts of the performance, which you certainly need to clearly lay out. You can talk about expectations. You can talk about the impact. And you can do all of that in a respectful manner. And then you can include them in the discussion to find out how you can help, how you can support, uh, but really being clear in expectations and how you can support and help, and also laying out the expectations in terms of consequences, what happens. And I think just doing those things is an act of love because you're helping people understand what the job is, what the roles, responsibilities, how we can support one another, but also helping them determine, is the job a good fit for them? And helping them to come to that conclusion. In all of my years of, even with state agencies, if there were terminations, the state agencies used to be notorious for having uh, lawsuits and grievances filed. But in any terminations that I worked with, people kind of arrived at that themselves because all of the other things had been done up front: job expectations, support,
You're a walking
training.
textbook, right?
Yes.
You're a walking textbook. You just I could just take this segment, write it up, submit it to publication. It would be published. So what you're saying is you don't let go of respect. What do you do with your emotional triggers? Sometimes people are doing stuff that must irritate you. You must think, how dumb can you get? You must have ugly thoughts. So what do you do? How do you go from your ugly thoughts to leading with love and sitting down and saying, I want to make sure you're clear about expectations. Let's talk this through. Here's the standard and here's your performance. They're not on the same level. How do you go from ugly thoughts to that?
Yeah. So you do sometimes have frustrations, and I don't really. I see human nature. I think. None of it is personal. I don't take it. I don't have attachments to having things my way or any of that. I'm not ego driven, kind of. So it's I see people. It's looking past whatever the exterior is to really listen to what people are saying, to observe them. Even before I talk with or meet someone, I'm listening and I'm observing. And I have a real sense of who they are. And even I can read in an email how people are feeling and where they're coming from. And so I can anticipate that. When I respond, I try to respond back to support or alleviate whatever that I hear in that email or in the conversation.
There we go. I get it. So here are the magic ingredients as I'm hearing it. You have a sense of the universal connection of all things.
Mm,
You believe in love and respect. You're
mhm,
highly intuitive so that you have an ability to read people in an unfiltered sense.
mhm.
And it's an extraordinary, as from what I'm picking up, it's an extraordinary gift that not that many people have. So that you just if you can look at an email, because I can do that. I
Mhm.
can look at an email and just know it's like almost a physical sensation. Do you get a physical sensation?
I do. I do. Absolutely.
Okay. So you look at the email, you get that physical sensation,
Mhm.
and you trust it.
I do.
You don't second guess it and say, "Oh, I shouldn't be thinking." You trust it,
Yes.
and then you
I
test
do.
it out. Because you're telling me that when you're talking to this program person about the expectations, for an example, you must have said at least 3 times just now, and then you listens. So you're talking and you're listening and you're watching and you're talking. So it's testing. Am I on the right path here? Am I talking to this? Am I getting through? Is this
Right.
person engaged?
That's exactly it. Exactly.
How do you get to share your philosophy with people? And change happens or beyond.
Mhm.
Wait, let me back up. You know what you're saying is not widely known, right?
That I do know. Not even just not widely known, even when you say it, not widely accepted either.
Yes. Okay. So how do you get a chance to share your philosophy?
And it has to be done repeatedly too, even with the people that you work with that, they they may not see it and believe it. So it comes through modeling it and doing it. But I try to talk about it a lot in terms of we have, all staff meetings, for instance. We have a staff kind of retreat coming up. So we're going to be doing a lot of those kind of conversations then. I send out emails to people. I sent out one just this morning, preparing everybody for this retreat that we have coming up, where we and talked about thinking brilliantly, um, and it's not about these wonderful ideas. It's about letting the light in so that you can think deeper when you begin to have discussions about where we're going to be in the next year and what do we bring to this. So uh it's through those kinds of things, and then just in the meeting people walking down the hallway, and I'm attuned um to watch people even though they're not directly reporting to me. I'm looking at it and I can sense if something's going on with them, and then just kind of following up. I was having a conversation with a coordinator yesterday, and it was something about her look, and I said, "You're not feeling well today, are you?" And she told me she wasn't. So it's just paying attention to people in letting them know that they are important as well. And I try to take every opportunity to be able to do that.
I'm just sort of stunned that you exist in the world. Okay, so this is wonderful. The word that comes to mind is other focused. So when something happens, a disappointment happens, or a person's something's not right, you trust your instinct something's not right. And then you look at the other person, and your concern is what can be done in the context of this person. There is someone I know who sends off emails focused on what she wants to say. And half the time, a lot of the time, I won't put a number on it, it doesn't hit. People don't know what she's talking about. That's because the focus is on what she wants to say. What you're saying is you stay keep a focus on the recipient, on the other person. How are they feeling? How might this be coming across? Even when someone has messed up on the job or not met expectations, your focus is on who is this person? What does it take for me to reach them?
That's right. That's right. It's just like the email I sent this morning about the upcoming retreat that we're having. It was 4 sentences, but it was about the focus on what we could do together with this retreat.
I am so delighted you decided to join us and to be here and to share your wisdom. I totally applaud what you've able to create and change happens. And I do know that you've expanded. And by the way, that new building, it had just been erected when I became field advisor and walked through it. So that
Right.
you're proud to show me their brand new building. How do you handle staff discontent or board discontent or community discontent? How do you handle it when people come at you?
I just face it head on. First of all, I'm going to try and know what's going on and anticipate anything and prepare and plan for it. But I believe in direct, open, honest communication. So I don't believe in, overlooking things or whatever of that. Thomas Freeman tells a story about a Bedouin, and he was he's on the desert. Somebody comes up and steals his turkey, and he tells his sons that you need to go after them. They stole my turkey, and the sons kind of just laughed it off and said, "Oh no." And then the next time they came back and they stole his camel, and he goes back to the son and again and says, "You need to go after these people. They stole my camel." And the sons, they just kind of ignore him again. And then the next time they came and they raped his daughter. And the Bedouin said to them, if you had gone after them when they stole my turkey, they wouldn't have done this. And so that's kind of how I see it. If we have conversations and if you notice something that's wrong or anything that you have that you need to say, I think that you say that directly, openly, respectfully, and look for opportunities to bring it together. Community is messy. When I talk about that 24-member steering committee, when we first formed it, that's a messy thing to do, but you hang in and you dialogue and you bring people together and you try to get that higher road to remind people of who we are and what our values are and what we're trying to accomplish. So whether that's community or the people that I work with or whoever I might be interacting with, I believe open, honest, direct, respectful conversation and listening and really understanding their point of view and then trying to reach some kind of agreement.
Alan, close it out again. It has been a sheer delight to have you. The wisdom that you have given us will just could fill me up the rest of the day, if not the week. I am so delighted of what you are doing. I know you're making a difference in the community and beyond. If you're in 49 counties
Mhm.
and what you have said, I wish there was a way to bottle it and distribute it widely so that people can get that being a leader is possible if you're willing to follow the precepts that you just laid out for us. If anybody wants to know about Change Happens, what's the website?
It's www.changehappens with an S TX.org.
Change Happens Texas TX.org. And if
Yes,
someone wants to contact you personally, is there a way for them to do that?
they can do that through email. I'm hstagg at changehappens.tx.org.
Okay. Thank you kindly. Is there any question I didn't ask?
No, you covered it all, and it was just really thrilling for me to be able to share this story with you. I thank you for the attention, and thank you for really hearing me and understanding what I was trying to say and accepting that. It was just a joy for me, and I'm really humbled to be asked. And thank you.
Thrilled beyond measure.